إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن.
أن يعطي الأجرة، وهذا هو العرف. معناه أن العرف يدخل في معاملات الناس، يدخل في تعاطيهم مع الأشياء وفي بيوعهم وفي أقوالهم وأفعالهم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the Shaykh said, inshallah, now we're going to look at the qa'idah that we were looking at yesterday, complete it, and then move on to the next qa'idah, which is that harm should be removed. And the qa'idah that we were looking at yesterday is known as al-urf al-muhakkam, which is that the custom of a people is considered in legal matters and can actually be, it can actually take a legal ruling. And so the Shaykh said that we spoke yesterday about al-urf al-qawli, which is what people say and the customs of their language, idiomatic expressions that they use to indicate specific things that might not be even in the same language with another people. So given a certain area, they say certain things. And so this expression that they use, the outward meaning might be in one place mean something, but in that place amongst the custom of the people, it means a specific thing, and therefore it takes on the ruling of that thing. So for instance, the Shaykh mentioned that dabba in the Arabic language really meant these small little insects like ant or something like that, but it came to be used to mean things that you ride, something that you ride on. So if an Arab swore an oath, wallahi, I'm not going to ride on a dabba, that because the urf of the Arabs now is that a dabba is something you ride on, it's taken that he meant like a donkey or a horse or a mule, and he didn't mean an ant or something like that. So that would be applied, and he would have to expiate accordingly. And then also in divorce, the Shaykh said, for instance, in some cultures, people will say, we're finished, or there's nothing between you and me anymore. And they mean divorce. Whereas in another culture, that might not have that meaning. It might not, that expression might not have the meaning of divorce, and therefore urf, or the custom of a people linguistically, idiomatically, is taken into consideration. So the divorce does occur if indeed the word customarily means I divorce you, even though they don't specifically and literally specify I divorce you. So the Shaykh said that custom in all of these type of things is taken into consideration, and indeed will have that legal ruling. Now, he also said that there's the urf of actions, af'al. So you have the fi'li and the qawli. In the actions, the example the Shaykh gave, for instance, is what is bay' al-mu'atat, in which there's a commercial transaction that occurs between people based on just giving and exchanging. There's nothing stated between them. And the Shaykh said that Imam Shafi'i radiyallahu anhu said that this type of transaction is invalid. That in order for a commercial transaction to be valid, the person has to say, I'd like to buy this for you, and the other person says it's $10, and they give him $10, they say, okay, and that's it. There has to be the exchange. Whereas the other Imam said, no, as long as whatever the custom of the people, they recognize it. So for instance, you go into a store, you put down something on the thing, he looks at it, rings it up, puts his hand out, and you give him the money, even though you've literally said nothing. That, the custom of the people in that transaction is that there's a buying and selling transaction. And so Imam Malik and the other Imam said that bay' al-mu'atat is valid, that it's perfectly valid. The Shaykh said also that the later Shafi'i scholars, Imam al-Juwayni, Imam al-Ghazali, radiyallahu anhuma, that they went to the opinion that in fact this type of commercial transaction is valid because of the custom of the people, and it would make it difficult, obviously, if you eliminated that type of commercial transaction. The Shaykh said now, so since the 5th and 6th century, the Shafi'i basically have changed their opinion and do agree on that. He said if you look at the situation now, you buy and sell with machines. It's not even a human being. You go to a gas station, you put your card in, and there's a transaction. If according to Imam Shafi'i, is invalid, that type of transaction. And so the fact that the custom of the people now is that these things are normal, and people understand these to be commercial exchanges, that the urf itself makes it valid. There's a validity in it because of the custom of the people. The Shaykh said, for instance, if you go to a barber and you sit down in the chair, or he calls you over, you sit down in the chair, and you don't say how much or anything, and you make some motion and he cuts your hair, and then in the end you say thank you, you pay him. That according to Imam Shafi'i would be an invalid exchange. That there had to be some type of expression from the two that indicated that indeed some commercial transaction occurred. The other Imams say no, and the later Imam said it is. So he said from these examples you can see that custom indeed does affect the Sharia, and it affects the legal rulings. And this is the essential meaning of this principle, that custom is considered in legal rulings.
هذا العرف يعمل به وهو قاعدة من قواعد الشريعة، وهو دليل على مرونة الشريعة، بمعنى أن هناك متغيرات تتعامل معها الشريعة، تتعامل مع نوايا الناس، تتعامل مع أعرافهم ومع تقاليدهم. لكن التعامل مع العرف هل هو وتأثير العرف هل هو مطلق أو ليس مطلقا؟ الجواب لا، تأثير العرف ليس مطلقا. العرف يعمل به بشروط. الشرط الأول أن لا يخالف نصا من كتاب أو سنة. إذا خالف نص الكتاب والسنة العرف لا يعمل به. مثلا يعني أهل الجاهلية لما جاءهم النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قالوا إنا وجدنا آباءنا على أمة وإنا على آثارهم مهتدون. وجدنا آباءنا على طريقة، فهم كانوا يعبدون الأصنام من دون الله سبحانه وتعالى، يجعلون مع الله آلهة. فالله سبحانه وتعالى رد عليهم: قل أولو جئتكم بأهداء ما وجدتم عليه آباءكم قالوا إنا بما أرسلتم به كافرون فانتقمنا منهم. فالعرف الفاسد، العرف الذي يخالف الشريعة، يخالف نصوص الكتاب والسنة، هذا العرف لا يعمل به، ليس عرفا صحيحا وليس عرفا مقبولا. العرف أيضا يجب أن يكون يعني قلنا لا يخالف نصوص الكتاب والسنة. مثلا بعض الناس يقول جرى العرف بالتعامل بالربا، هذا العرف ليس صحيحا لأنه يصادم النصوص لا يمكن أن نعتمد عليه. ثانيا ليكون العرف معمولا به يجب أن يكون عرفا عاما، وقيل إن الخاص أيضا يعمل به. مثلا إذا كان هذا العرف ليس عاما على الناس بل هو عرف شخص واحد، لا يعمل به بالنسبة للآخرين، بالنسبة لمن يتعامل معه، لكن بالنسبة له هو قد يكون هذا العرف معمولا به. ثالثا لا يخالف العرف إجماعا طبعا، وهذا مثل مخالفة الكتاب والسنة، لا يخالف إجماع المسلمين. رابعا أن يكون عرفا سابقا وليس لاحقا. العرف السابق هو العرف الذي يعني أصبح عرفا عند الناس. معنى ذلك أن العرف اللاحق لا يعمل به. ما معنى هذا الكلام؟ معناه أن من يريد أن يحتج بالعرف، مثلا العرف محكم في الصداق، مثلا تقول امرأة ما عرفنا الصداق أو عقد على صداق المثل أو وقع النكاح، يسمى نكاح تفويض وهو الذي لا يذكر فيه مهر. بعد ذلك تأتي أمام القاضي وتقول صداقي كان $1,000,000. قد يكون هذا من فترة طويلة، يعني تزوجها منذ 40 سنة. نضرب دائما مثل في بلاد المشرق، مثلا هناك كان شوي عندها فقر وحاجة ثم جاء البترول فأصبحت يعني، فنقول إذا قالت هذه المرأة العرف الآن أن ابنتي صداقها كبير، نقول لها في تلك الأيام أنت ما كان العرف هكذا، أنت لم تكوني مثل ابنتك، وبالتالي لا يمكن أن تحتجي بهذا العرف اللاحق. العرف لا بد أن يكون سابقا ويجب أن لا يكون لاحقا. يجري عرف الناس بأشياء لكن الآن في الوقت الحاضر، لكن لا يمكن أن نحتج بها على مسألة على حكم مضى في زمن سابق. هذا معناه قلنا العرف يجب أن يكون سابقا ولا ينبغي أن يكون لاحقا، بمعنى أن العرف اللاحق ليس حجة على الأحكام أو على المعاملات التي مضت قبل ذلك.
مثلا إذا بالنسبة للبترول في أيام الفقر يعني العرف السابق
العرف السابق أن صداقها كان قليلا.
نعم.
مثلا إذا قامت امرأة من 40 سنة تزوجت 40 سنة وقالت أنا كالئي وهو صداقي المؤجل كان 100,000 ريال و200,000 ريال، نقول له يعني هذا ليس صحيحا. مثلا افرض عن تصفية التركة، قالت كان كالئي صداق المؤجل كان كذا، فأعطت رقما مبالغا فيه، فقلنا لها لماذا؟ قالت لأن ابنتي الآن تزوجت بك. قل لا، الأمر هذا عرف جديد، وضع ابنتك ليس كوضعك، والعرف أيضا يجب أن يكون مضطردا ولا يكون مضطربا، يعني عرف منتظم. مثلا هذه المنطقة يتعامل فيها بالدولار، إذا باع الإنسان لإنسان وما ذكر العملة، فالعملة هنا مفهوم أنها الدولار، لكن إذا كانت في ما يسمى بالمناطق الحرة التي تباع فيها بكل عملات، فهذا عرف مضطرب لا يمكن أن يحكم به. إما القاضي يلزمهم باليمين، وإما أن يفسخ العقد للجهل بالثمن. فالعرف يجب أن يكون عاما وليس خاصا، على خلاف، بعضهم قال إن الخاص أقوى. العرف يجب أن يكون سابقا وليس لاحقا. العرف يجب أن يكون مضطردا وليس مضطربا. العرف طبعا يجب أن لا يخالف كتابا أو سنة، وأن لا يخالف إجماعا. هذه هي الشروط التي يعمل بالعرف فيها.
So the Shaykh said that with the urf, really what custom indicates is the lassitude or the ability, the flexibility of our sharia. It indicates the flexibility of our sharia, and also that what human beings interact with and the customs that they do, that the sharia indeed takes those into consideration and doesn't demand that they change those things, but with conditions. So the Shaykh said, now we're going to look at the conditions of urf and when urf is used. The first condition of the ability to use the custom of people is that the custom itself does not go against a textual statement or a textual ruling, either from the book or the sunnah. So for instance, the Quran says that the non-Muslim, they said, this is what we found, when they were asked why they're worshipping idols, they said, this is what we found our fathers doing before us, and we're simply following them. So what they were saying really is that's ihtijaj, it's like trying to prove their position with urf. We were worshiping, the only reason we're worshiping idols is because this is our custom. So the Quran refutes that and says that even if they were ignorant, even if they didn't know anything, indeed you're actually rejecting the truth. So to use the custom that is unacceptable by Sharia as some proof for why you're doing something is invalid. And that's why the Shaykh said that that's the first condition, that it doesn't go against the Quran. The second condition is that the urf, the custom, has to be something that is implemented by the general populace. In other words, the custom has to be something that the majority of people do it. It's a known custom in the people. Although the Shaykh did say that some of the scholars say that the custom of some people, like a specific group or a small number of people, that sometimes that is indeed taken into consideration. But generally the ruling is that it has to be a custom of a people, something well known amongst the people, or else it's not. And the third one is that it cannot go against the consensus, which has in a sense the same ruling as the book and the sunnah. So it's really similar to the first condition, but it means that the ijma' of the scholars, the mujtahideen, the people of ijtihad, when they agree on a matter, then even though the custom says otherwise, you still can't go against it, because the ijma' is something that is not permissible to go against. And finally, the fourth condition is that the urf is something that has precedent. It's not something that has emerged recently. In other words, it's something that is known to be in the past. So the previous custom is not superseded or overridden by something that emerges recently in the people. The Shaykh said an example of that is in the Arabian Peninsula. Before there was petrol, they had certain customs there, especially related to the dowry. So a woman who got married and she has a mu'ajjal, which is a delayed, the deferred dowry, because the people have become very wealthy and now it's a lot, she can't say that, oh, now I want such and such amount of money, because that's become the custom today. In other words, this isn't a proof. It's not grandfathered in. Some new kind of custom is not added on to the previous customs. It's in fact the previous customs that take precedent over whatever emerges newly into the culture. And he said, and basically what this means is that the urf itself has to be something that is muttarid. In other words, it's something that it's congruous in the area that you're in. It's in a state that is not in a turbulent state. It's not something that is ambiguous or difficult to understand. For instance, the Shaykh used the example of money. If we're making a transaction here in California, generally, the vast majority of people, when they're speaking, if I say you owe me 100, people assume it's $100. Later, somebody says, I didn't mean dollars, I meant Deutschmark. In California, that's not the custom of the people. Whereas the Shaykh said in areas that are free zones, there's certain trading areas in the world where they have international currencies. Like sometimes at airports and things like that, you have the duty-free zones or marketplaces like in South America or Gibraltar, places where there's free zones. There, you can't use the urf because there really isn't one about money. So for a man to go to the qadi and he told me he'd sell it to me for 1,000 and I thought he meant $1,000 and he in fact meant 1,000 of another amount. That is unacceptable because it's not muntazim. It's not it's not organized. There's not some organizing principle, some underlying principle that puts it into a context. It's in a state of turbulence. So for that reason, you can't use the custom. So those are the conditions that the Shaykh said in which you would take the custom into consideration.
العرف من مطالبة بحقه نهدمه ولكن في مقابل أن نعوضه تعويضا عادلا.
The Shaykh said the next qa'idah and the final qa'idah that we're going to look at and then perhaps have time for some questions is adarar yuzal, and the meaning here is that harm is removed. Things that are harmful should be removed. And what is harmful is anything that harms the human being. And the Shaykh said that there's some proofs in the Quran for this. One of them that is a mother should not be harmed as a result of her child, and the child should not be harmed as a result of the mother. So there should be no harm incurred in the breastfeeding or pregnancy, these type things. And also the Prophet ﷺ said that there is no harming and there's no reciprocating harm. So la darar wa la dirar. Darar is that you should harm somebody. Dirar is that somebody should harm you, reciprocating some harm that he received from you. In other words, that the reason that he's harming you is because you harmed him. And that, the Shaykh said, is in fact, it's a hadith that reaches the Prophet ﷺ by about 3 or 4 of the Sahaba, and it's considered Hasan. It's a good hadith, and so it has a legal ruling. And the basic meaning of this, he said, if you look at it, no harm and no reciprocating harm, is that it's actually negating or nullifying the concept of harm in Islam. That really there should be no harm. That's the indication. And he said that there's 2 types of harm. There's a harm that has occurred. It's waqa'a, it's waqa', it's actually occurred. And then there's a harm that's mutawaqqa', it's expected. In other words, it's probable. It's something that you think might happen. In that case, the Shaykh said in the harm that has already occurred, we have things like urush al-jinayat, which are those things when somebody harms you physically, then there are things that that are done in order to reciprocate or to recompense that person for the harm that's been inflicted. So when crimes, when some type of act, a tort, what they call in the English law system, when a tort occurs or something that affects another person, that there are ways of recompensing that person. And that's why the Sharia has given us those ways, because in a sense it's removing the harm that occurred by some sort of replacement. And that's the foundation of it. And then also in mu'amalat you have the concept of shuf'a, which is preemptive buying. When you have somebody bought something, two people own property together, and then one of them is going to sell his other property, that the person who owns the other half of the property has right to it. He shouldn't, because it's harm. He might sell it to somebody he doesn't want him to sell it to. A lot of things can occur out of that. So the Sharia has given a type of situation where it's in order to remove the possibility of harm. It's mutawaqqa'. It hasn't actually happened. So the Sharia is looking at preventing harm and also removing harm that actually occurs. And so this qa'idah, this principle, involves both of them. Now, another element here is harm that occurs between spouses. This is also something. It can be something that's expected, something that has actually happened, and the Sharia has measures for dealing with that. The Shaykh said that harm is in fact something that is based on the possibility to remove it. In other words, not all harm can be removed. So when we say al-darar yuzal, it doesn't necessarily mean the actual harm in and of itself, but there are ways of placating what's happened. So for instance, if somebody's killed, obviously you can't replace their life. But there are ways of recompensing to the best of the ability, hasab al-imkan, according to one's capacity or the possibility. So for instance, the idea of qisas, which is that if somebody takes a life, their life is taken. Or the idea of diyat, which is that if you accidentally kill somebody, then there's blood money that is paid to that person's relatives, who are the wulat ad-dam. They're the people that are responsible for his blood. You pay that as a way of recompensing the harm. And so in a sense, it's an attempt to remove, to the best of human possibility, to remove that harm that's occurred. And the Shaykh said another principle under this sub-rubric here is ad-darar la yuzal bi dararin akhar, that harm is not removed by another harm. Now the Shaykh said that even though this is a principle, it has to be taken into consideration the variables involved. So for instance, that the Shaykh said that in fact in the Sharia, if you have a general harm can be removed by a more specific harm. So something that's harming everybody, if the only way to get the general harm away is that still there's going to be some people that it's better to do that than not do anything at all. Or for instance, if you have something that there's a lot of harm, and then to remove it with a little bit of harm, then also you would use that means. So you have a general problem, and there's a lot of applications for this, and it happens all the time, even in this culture. It's even though we don't want to do this, it's better than this situation. So, and then another one is what's known as the akhaf ad-dararain, what we call in this culture the lesser of two evils. This is also a Sharia principle. In other words, you have two things that are both, neither of them are good, but you want to take the one that has, it's a dilemma. You've got one or the other. And so you take the one that's going to have the least harm for the greatest number of people. Examples that the Shaykh gave of that, and he said that it's a principle in usul, like the ulama say, is that yuqaddam al-akhaf means that the lesser is always preferred over the greater in harm. You're always going to take the lesser over the greater if those are the only two choices. An example that the Shaykh gave is a woman who dies, and she was pregnant. Now, normally, we know that if a human being dies, it's not permitted to aggress against their body, like mutate them, anything like that. They're supposed to be buried with dignity. And yet, if a woman dies, for instance, dies in childbirth or something, and they need to get the baby out, there's another life in there to take to consideration. So it's not a good to take a woman and cut her body open after she dies. But it's the lesser of two evils, because if you leave the child in the womb, the child dies. So you've lost two lives. So in that type of situation, you would override the normal ruling, which is that you don't aggress against a dead person's body. You would override that by the ruling that a life should be saved to the utmost of our capacity. And another one is also an example that he gave that's it's given is a person who dies after eating a lot of money, like gold or something like that. That you can open up their stomach to get the gold out because you don't want to bury them with the gold. I mean, obviously these things happen probably in history. One of them, smugglers do stuff like that. I mean, it's odd stuff. They smuggle diamonds, they'll swallow them. So if they die, then you take it out. هذا يقع هنا في التهريب. ناس يبلعون الماس ليهرب هذا الشيء ومنهم من يموت
يبقر عن باطنه.
And then the other is if somebody has a house that is causing a lot of harm, then the house can be destroyed. So also sometime there needs to be a road, a thoroughfare put forward. Normally you don't want to destroy somebody's house, but if there's a greater good, the general good is that you need a road there, and the lesser good, the khas, is that the person's house is there, then you'd remove the house. The government can do that, but he said this would always be done with recompensation. You can't just destroy somebody's property without recompensing them. The Sharia is just. So even though the qa'idah works, there should always be the person who's going to lose out has to be taken into consideration.
طبعا في ترتيب الضرر الفقهاء ضرر الكثير يعني حماية المجتمع. إذا أراد أحدهم أن يبيع بيعا بغرر ولو رضي بذلك يقول للشريعة لا، الغرر لا يجوز، تتوقع كل ضرر وتنفيه قبل أن يقع ولا تسمح به حتى ولو رضي الناس.
So the Shaykh said that in the principle that, for instance, a lot of harm is removed by a lesser amount of harm, he said that the ulama used examples probably that fit their environments then, because a lot of these were developed obviously in a pre-industrial age. So he said that the examples that are used in the books probably tend to be more appropriate for those type of environments. But he said he'll mention a few that you find. One of them is if a chicken swallows a ring, and the person sees the chicken swallow, it's his ring, and he says, I want my ring back, and the owner of the chicken says, well, that's my best egg-laying chicken, I don't want to sacrifice it. The Sharia says the ring is more valuable, if indeed it was more valuable than the chicken, and therefore the chicken gets killed, and you give money to the man for that. Another one he said is an example of somebody who brings a small camel or any other animal into a building that he might be renting, for instance, and then the animal grows up and you can't get it out. So he said that in that case, again, the Sharia says you sacrifice the animal before you break down the wall. And then the Shaykh said, obviously, with in the case of what they call organ transplants, this is really based on this idea of the ad-darar al-kathir yuzaru bid-darar al-qalil, under this idea that a person who is going to die, that's big problem. Whereas a person who has already died, they have organs that can benefit that person, even though it's not a good thing to take somebody's body and dissect it after their death and take things from it, because there's a greater benefit in that. This is why the ulama have said that. But he said that there's a problem with beating hearts, because there's clear life in the heart still, and so obviously you have some difficult situations. أنا بغيت يعني أسألك الآن هم اكتشفوا مثلا بالنسبة للناس اللي قرأت كتاب عن هذا غريب جدا، أنه في ناس اللي زرعت قلوب غيرهم أنهم حلموا بأحلامهم، وحتى غيرت الطبائع، وحتى الأزواج الزوجات شهدنا بهذا، ومنهم من صار يحب نفس الموسيقى الذي صاحب القلب الأول كان يحب، ومنهم مثلا قرأت عن واحد هو كان نباتي يكره اللحم، والراجل الذي أخذ قلبه كان يحب اللحم، لكن بعد ما أخذ قلبه صار يكره اللحم ويتجنب اللحم.
سبحان الله.
وفي كتاب كامل عن هذا.
سبحان الله. هذا ما طلعنا عليه بالمجمع الفقهي البحوث التي قدمتها. ما قدم فقط
كانوا يدل أنه
يعني بعد دراسة كبيرة تجنبنا مسألة زراعة الأعضاء التناسلية، لأنها ظهر أنها تحمل مبيضات وفيها مشاكل كثيرة.
I was just mentioning about, with the heart, there's been a couple books written on this by people that have done a lot of heart transplants. The people that get the organs actually start, a lot of times they actually will take on characteristics of the people that had the organs before. And a good friend of my brother's had a liver transplant, and he literally became a different person completely. And when he found out about the person who had the liver, it was that person's personality. So even his musical taste, because this man was a musician, and he started loving Hawaiian music and playing Hawaiian music, and the liver that he got was this Hawaiian man who played Hawaiian music. So the Shaykh said that they didn't, when they were examining this, they didn't hear about any of that stuff. But he did say that they did agree that you shouldn't transplant sexual organs. They didn't feel that the sexual, anything that relates to lineage and to that they shouldn't be, because it involves mixing of like sperm, semen, things like that, eggs, the ovaries, taking a woman taking another woman's ovaries, something like that, or sperm insemination, artificial insemination, those type things. The Shaykh said that also in relation to preemptive buying, shuf'a, that this is a situation where, for instance, he used the example of the two of us share a house, and then I decide I want to sell my share. That the Sharia says the person who you share with has the first bid. He has the first right, not because of a darar, but darar mutawaqqa, that there's a possibility that he gets a bad partner. Somebody comes in that he doesn't like to work with, something like that. So he should have the first right. Now, Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu actually extended this to neighbors. That Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu said that if a neighbor is going to sell a house, then the neighbor should have the first choice in buying the house, because if you get a bad neighbor, you're in big trouble. So they should have that. He felt that should be part of the shuf'a. And he said that the wisdom of all of this is that the Sharia is a means to protecting people. And so anything that will do that, generally the Sharia the sacred law is wise in those decisions, in doing that, protecting the benefit of people. Another one is known as daman al-darak, which is the guarantee of something that is discovered after the sale. In other words, if you buy something and you find out that, in fact, for instance, you buy a house and you find out that it has all these termites, and the house it looked good when you bought it, but now you found out it's actually about to fall down. That in that type of case, if they didn't point out the harm or the fault, that you have the right either to have it redressed by the person who sold you, or actually to return it. And
موسيقى أنت.
Sheikh saying now the music fatwa, right? They'll probably call back. Yeah. So if like there's a aib because Imam Malik al-Mughanniya إذا اشترى جارية على ضمان الدرك. He said if you buy a woman who turns out she's a singer, that there's a reason you can return her. It's a aib. So the ضمان الدرك, if you buy something and then find out later that something's wrong with it, that you can in fact return it. So that's the ruling. And another thing is also in animals. If you buy an animal and find out that the animal in fact had some fault that you didn't realize before. But this is not something that occurs later, like you buy it and then it breaks down. It's just your tough luck or something like that. That's different. But if it's actually something that was in the thing itself before you purchased it, then they have to guarantee. Now, one of the things, what's known as al-bara'atu min al-aib, which is that the person stipulates, if you find any faults, it's what they say here, they call it as is, I think, right? Isn't that what they call that? Yeah, that. In other words, anything you find out later, tough luck. The ulama differed on that. Some of them said that it's not, because what will happen is it leads to people not liking other people. I mean, there's a lot of problems that can emerge from that. So the idea was to maintain the social, and some of them said that was permissible to stipulate that.
ترتيب الأضرار قاعدة كبيرة في الشريعة، وبالتالي ترتيب الأولويات الأشياء التي قد تكون سليم إخلاصهم وأقربهم لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
So the Shaykh said that what we've looked at are al-Qawa'id al-Kubra, the greatest of these principles. There are many, many others, but these five are the foundational principles. They're the axioms, the matrix of all of the other principles. The Shaykh said that Imam al-Maqari, one of the great scholars from Morocco, actually arrived at 1,400 principles, in which he basically created a complete codex, really, of all of the foundations of legal rulings. So all of legal rulings could go back to one of those 1,400 qawa'id. And he said that also the point of this was to show the important relationship between our roots and our branches. That the philosophy of law, I mentioned this earlier, the West doesn't have a real philosophy of law. Whereas when you look at the Islamic Sharia, there's a real philosophy of law here. In other words, the branches will always be extensions of the roots, which is not true in other legal systems. So we see clear connections because there is congruity, there is harmony in the wisdom of our Sharia. He said that he wants us to understand that, going back to the first lecture that the Shaykh gave, that the entire Sharia, sacred law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, came for the benefit of humanity, that it's for masalih, that's why it came. And that if the human being knows the reason, the legal, what they call ratio lexis, if they know the reason for the law, why the law has come to us, he said it's a good thing. There's a great benefit in that. And if a person doesn't know, he should ask the people who know, the ulama, if he's interested. Why do we do this? It's an important thing. Increase your iman, make you believe that the Sharia is indeed wise. But he said it's important to remember that there are rules that are ta'abudiyah, that are that they don't have this rational element They're in a sense, they're irrational from our perspective. We don't believe that they're irrational in reality, but they're irrational from our perspective in that we cannot understand them through the rational mind. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hidden from us the rational reason, that He did that for a wisdom, and the wisdom is istislam. That the Shaykh said, Rasul hikmah istislam. That really at the root of wisdom is surrendering. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran about Ibrahim alayhi salam, that he submitted in totality. The Quran says, Sami'na wa ta'na, we hear and we obey. That really is what Islam is about. It's about submitting to something that you might not always understand, but you're trusting in your Lord, that He's doing it for a good reason. And so he said, we can see this in the life of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Why does Abu Bakr as-Siddiq have the highest maqam amongst the Sahaba? Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu is the one who was in the most state of submission. For instance, the Shaykh said that when the mushrikun had heard that the Prophet ﷺ had gone to Jerusalem in one night and then returned, he actually told them that he went there in one night. This was a journey that took him a month to go there and a month to come back. And he made it in one night. And then he described for them Bayt al-Maqdis, and they knew he'd never seen it. He also even told them about a caravan that was on the way and who was leading the caravan and when it would come. But the mushrikun, they wanted to go to Abu Bakr, and they went to him first because obviously if he was the closest, if he disbelieved, then it would cause a lot of people to disbelieve. And they asked him first, what do you say about a man who says he went all the way to Jerusalem in one day? Do you think that's possible? And he said, that's impossible. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And then he said, well, this is what Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is saying. He said, if he said it, it's true. So the point was, he didn't understand it. How he did. He didn't know about how the means. It's just, if he said it, it's true. In other words, my trust in him is so absolute, I don't have to know how it's possible. But if he said it, it's possible somehow, even though I don't know. And another example of that was Sulh Hudaybiyah. Many of the Sahaba, they were very upset about the fact that it appeared to them that the polytheists got the better of the bargain, and they didn't even feel comfortable about why should they be making these treaties with these people who were persecuting them, torturing them. And when they went to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, he said, this is the messenger of Allah. In other words, who do you think what do you think he's doing? Just because you can't understand the wisdom in it doesn't mean that there's not a wisdom in it. And indeed, as that would be revealed to them later, it was all for the benefit of the Muslims. But at that time, they couldn't see the benefit. So what the Shaykh is saying, that at the time that you don't see the benefit, don't doubt the benefit. Just know that the benefit is hidden from you, and your role or your task in that type of situation then is to submit and say, Sami'na wa ta'na. This is it. And there's a great wisdom in that.
الشريعة إذن تدعو الإنسان لحياته في الدنيا وفي الآخرة يا أيها الذين آمنوا استجيبوا لله وللرسول إذا دعاكم لما يحييكم فكلها دعوة للحياة، لحياة الإنسان، لحياة روحه، لحياة بدنه، لحياته في علاقته لهذا النور المبارك. فعلى الإنسان أن يهنئ نفسه وأن يشكر الله سبحانه وتعالى أنه هداه للإسلام، وأن يثبت ويتثبت وأن لا تزعزعه الأهواء والشكوك والشبهات التي تعترض الإنسان عن يمين ويسار، ويتمسك بدينه حتى ولو كان كالقابض عال جمر، كما جاء في الحديث يأتي على الناس زمان القابض هو على دينه كالقابض عال جمر. وقد نظم ذلك الشاطبي رحمه الله تعالى في ألفيته في قراءات، يقول وهذا زمان الصبر من لك بالتي كقبض على شمر فتنجو من البلاء ولو أن عينا ساعدت لتوكفت سحائبها بالدمع ديما وهو الطلا ولكنها عن قسوة القلب قحطها فيا ضائعة الأعمال تمشي سبهللا.
So the Shaykh said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, answer the call of Allah. When Allah calls you, answer the call of Allah and of His Messenger. Because they're calling you to what gives you life. So what the Shaykh was saying is that we should know that this Sharia is calling us to what gives us life. It brings our hearts to life. And for that reason, it's a call to life itself. It's a life-affirming, life-giving law. And so we should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this blessed light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We should thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance. We should feel that guidance. We should cling to the guidance. And he said that it shouldn't concern us, those doubts, the caprice that enters in the heart from time to time, the doubts, the ambiguous things that might occur to the heart. He said this is the nature of being a human being alive. He said you just ignore those things. You don't pay attention to them. You're firm in your resolve. You're aware that this indeed is a wise Sharia and Allah gave it to us as a great gift. And he said, and you cling to this no matter what, even if it's clinging to a hot coal, like the Prophet ﷺ said. And it's like Imam Shatibi radiallahu anhu said in his famous poem, which is in the Qira'at, the 10 recitations called Shatibiyah. He mentioned that this is a time when all you have is patience, because this is a time when clinging to your deen is like clinging to a hot coal. And even if your eye is pouring tears out constantly, just know that at least it's not dead, because when it's dry because it's dead. So the fact that you have great difficulties, the fact that it's really difficult, if you're affected by that, is a sign that you're still alive. It's when you have difficulties or you see the times around you are terrible and you're not affected by it, that's the real tribulation. So the Shaykh said that we should just really feel gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. هذا في واحد قال إنه رأيت في السنة الماضية لاحظت كما بدا لي أن الشيخ مسح على جوربين من القطن، كان يظهر أنه من القطن، فقال أنه ما هي الشروط التي تجيز هذا الشيء؟
المسح